and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to introduce everybody to our new manager. This is Rachel Susko. She goes by RJ. So this is her first meeting. And we have a jam-packed agenda, and we have a full audience. So thank you for everybody for coming this evening. I'd like to move forward with the approval of the bills list dated September 10th. Oh, sorry, the roll call.
All right, let me try and pronounce everything correctly. Mr. Amendola.
Here.
Mr. Kraus.
Present.
Ms. Perry.
Here.
Ms. Glasser.
Here.
Ms. Domitz.
Here.
Mr. Rosario.
Here.
Mr. Lavasser.
Here.
Mayor Bloom.
Here.
And Solicitor Corbel.
I'm here as well.
All right. Now we'll proceed to the approval of the minutes of the bill list. Thank you. Any discussion regarding the bill list? All in favor?
Aye.
All that opposed? Approval of the bill list. Moving on to the approval of the minutes dated August 27th, 2018.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All that opposed? Approval of the minutes. All right, moving forward to citizen comments. At this time, citizens may address the Borough Council on any issue appearing on today's agenda. Only residents and taxpayers of the Borough of Crafton will be permitted to address the council. Comments on non-agenda items will be taken at the end of tonight's meeting. Speakers will be permitted to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes. Groups of people will be required to designate a spokesperson to represent them before the council, who may speak for a maximum of 10 minutes. Speakers are asked to use the microphone at the speaker stand. Clearly state their name and address for the record and keep comments brief and to the point. Please spell your name for the record. All right. I'm just gonna go ahead and let everybody go. Brian Widmer?
Are we starting with the end of,
You wrote down your topics as being zoning, permitting, and codes. So we have multiple agenda items on such, so.
okay. Well, I'd like you to, so.
If you could,
You want me to start right now?
yeah, you have 3 minutes at the beginning of the meeting today to discuss.
Well, okay, I wasn't expecting this, but that's fine. All right, so what is this regarding, with the park and shade tree, or what, just ordinances, period?
Yeah, you have.
Well, I have
you have-
ordinances, but then I didn't know, because the park and shade tree and the paper streets is like, that's part of your main agenda, parts of that, right?
You have 3 minutes to address these issues that you'd like to address at this point.
Okay, well, how am I gonna address like 5 different issues in 3 minutes that are separate, complete different issues?
Okay,
All
so,
right, so you want me to start with zoning? All right, so let me start with zoning. And I'm kind of not too happy right now that our ordinance gentleman is not here, but I see his constituent is, so this will help me, all right? I'm addressing you as the people that have been elected, but yet the zoning guy that's in this meeting is supposedly about a lot of zoning stuff, and he's not here. And this is what's pertaining to every issue that I have. All right, so I guess I'll address it to you, and he'll watch the video, and then he'll be able to figure out what to do afterwards, all right? So first thing is zoning. So I want to make sure that your
Sir, you have to say your name up here.
Oh, Brian Whitmer, 448 Maxwell Street. Okay, you've heard me before. I didn't want to come back here, but apparently I had to. So first of all, I just put in a driveway in my house. And to kick salt in my wounds after I've been down here about these 2 trees that are on not my property, and thanks to our wonderful solicitor, he's proven that it's not on your property. So I had to go down and get the Allegheny records and pull the map of the original McDonough plan. From that, I know there's a 20-foot paper street in front of my house. I've cut the street in half. There are 3, what's the guy called that comes out and 3 survey markers on my property. From that, it's plain that he can find out the 10 feet away from my house where these trees lie. Okay, you have an ordinance. It's number 208. Let me get this up. It's a little, you caught me off guard here. I apologize. And this is very important to me because I spent a lot of time with this. Okay, so let me explain this to you. This started back on April 21st, when Mr. Robb came down to my property to look at these 2 giant trees that are dead. And he, right at that point, a day or 2 later, came back and said, these are not on Crafton's property. Well, as a Borough code enforcement officer, you have a code that's number 208 disease of or hazardous tree declaration nuisance. That's 208-6. So I called you up, he's supposed to come down and look. Then 208-7, investigation of the nuisance. Now I'm really abbreviating this because I'm trying to be quick for you. The Park and Shade Tree Commission is the one supposed to do this. Well, he must be apparently their representative. So he came down. He decided that they were nuisance trees, they're dead, they're dying, they need to be removed, but yet he walked away and said it's not Crafton's problem. Well, his obligation and this council's obligation, and me as a tax-paying citizen, right here it says on the next thing, notice of abatement of nuisance. So let me summarize it for you if you don't know this ordinance. You guys have an obligation to come look. Within 2 days, you're supposed to send a certified letter to the property owner of those trees. After that, the property owner has no more than 30 days to remove the trees, or they will get fined, or if they just don't want to remove the trees, Crafton now has the ability to go remove the trees and then put a lien on their home. Now, from April 21st to now, I've seen nothing happen. And then I got some other emails now just within the last 3 weeks where, once again, he took this to the solicitor. The solicitor decided that this paper street, there was a paper street, you can't abate it because there's a freaking easement under it, but I can't even own it because of that. All right, I know all the laws now. All right, so irregardless, these trees don't lie on my half of the paper street. And I have it all laid out down there now so he can walk down there and figure it all out without even thinking. Okay, I've made it thoughtless for the poor guy. All right, so within 30 days they're supposed to be removed, and end of story. I wouldn't be back here again, but here I am. Okay, I'm going to let that go because I got other stuff, and this is about one ordinance. Okay, so I will let you guys take the time or make a comment. I would appreciate actually some kind of rebuttal from this board about these trees and why he hasn't done his job that I'm paying him to do.
Thank you. So, the next person on the agenda, Greg Duker, 92 Sterrett. If you could please address the council.
Greg Duker, 92 Sterrett Street. I'm back again regarding sewage. So we've been ongoing since June 20th when we had 30 inches of sewage in my basement. We've been down here, we went round and round. Engineer said that there is no documentation of a chronic problem. We went around the neighborhood, we gave you proof that there's a chronic problem that's been going on from as long as Joyce Pagano says, 50 plus years up in our area. So it's not like an isolated incident, it's not a once a decade storm, once a 100-year storm. As we see again over the weekend, we got what, 6-8 inches of rain over the weekend. So this is not a anomaly. This is going to be the common We've been coming down here since the meeting, the first meeting after June 20th when we flooded. We've asked, James and myself, multiple times what's going to happen, and unfortunately, we haven't gotten an answer back yet. So here we are again, now hurricane season is upon us. As we've seen in the ocean now, many more circling around, and we need to know what's going to happen. We've given you proof that it's not an isolated incident. We've showed documentation that there's been multiple floodings between Sterrett and Bar on the lower half. I want to know how we get an answer. We've asked the question on record multiple times now, what is going to be done to address our problem? I don't have an answer. And I want to know, what do we have to do to get an answer? What do we need to, do I need another 30 inches of sewage in my basement? Like, how are we going to resolve the problem? It's kind of been going on, and I'm sure everyone's tired of hearing us talk and say the same thing over and over again. I'm kind of tired of talking and saying the same thing over again and getting blank stares for an answer. So I would like to know what I have to do to get an answer of what is going to be done to address our problem. Thank you.
Thank you. James Megan, 96 Sterrett.
James Bay, 96 Sterrett Street. Once again, to reiterate what Greg said, we're looking for answers, so if you guys could follow up with some kind of direction. Also, the repair done to the alley, I think it's like Perrine Street. Once again, those berms were set up way too high, so that's directing water into the problem sewer. And so I'm wondering, are you going to be doing anything about the fix that you made that is now going to basically exacerbate the problem that we told you about? So it's now directing more water into the sewer that you guys deemed was, or couldn't handle more water. So the fix that you made to that back alley is now making that problem worse, which, as he said before, when we get more and more storms, it's only going to be directing more and more water to that sewer that is then going to affect not only us, but everybody in our little block. So we need answers to these things because it's a problem that is now looming ahead of us that we know is going to happen again. It's not going to happen in 50 years, it's not going to happen in 100 years, it's going to happen again. So we're just here looking for solutions.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no additional citizen comments on the sign-in sheet, we're going to proceed with the mayor's report.
The items that I was going to discuss this evening, I needed the public works here, so I'll pass.
Okay. Seeing that the engineer is not here this evening, I'm going to proceed to the solicitor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Lavazza asked me to report on the Paper Street shade tree information. So I have done research with respect to our code of ordinances as mentioned by the gentleman in the back row. And from the issue that he is dealing with specifically, the trees are located within a paper street, and a paper street is not owned by the borough, it's owned by the adjacent property owners. And he indicated that he has put markers that divide the paper street.
That's correct.
So one side is his, the closest to his house that's adjoining his property, and the other side of the paper street is the property of the owner on the other side, which I believe is an apartment building.
Well, there are two trees, and one is clearly on his side, and it's actually almost on his original property line, not his fake 10 feet, but, and then the unfortunate one that goes after that, the one that's gonna destroy my constituent George Carey here at 450 Maxwell Street, this is my neighbor who's gonna get sliced in half, is the one that is abutting, it is on the other side of the 10 feet, but yes, yet it's on half of Lobos's side and on half of 452 Maxwell. So that tree's gonna have to be divided by two individuals, unfortunately. But it is laid out as plain and simple as I can do it for Mr. Kozlowski.
Okay,
All right?
so that being the case, I did review, we have two ordinances with respect to trees in the borough. We have an ordinance that created a shade tree commission, And then another ordinance, this is chapter 208, that the gentleman referenced in his comments, which regulates trees in the borough. And there is a provision related to diseased and hazardous trees. So when dealing with those issues, if the property owners where the trees belong, so in this case the folks on the other side of the paper street from that gentleman, it's their responsibility to remove. If they refuse, the citizens of the borough have recourse. They can make application to the Borough Shade Tree Commission, and the Shade Tree Commission does have the authority under the ordinance, section 208-7, to conduct an investigation to determine if the tree is diseased or hazardous. If that occurs, the Shade Tree Commission through the borough can issue a notice to the property owner to remove the tree within 30 days. If that does not occur, the borough does have the authority to go in and take down the trees and file a lien against the property owner whose property that diseased or nuisance tree resides upon. There is also an appeal process, so if someone does get a notification from the Borough and Shade Tree Commission that says, take down this tree, and the property owner would disagree for whatever reason, there is an appeal process and a hearing could be held in front of the Shade Commission. So I just wanted to clarify that. I think I addressed the paper street issue. I don't know if I need to go into that in any more detail. No. So there is a process, and I understand that Mr. Kazarowski may have been out to your property, but I'm not so sure that he was in doing so in his capacity or at the direction of Shade Tree Commission, and that's where that.
Well, okay, I can tell you, Mr. Solicitor, if you don't mind me interjecting.
No, you can talk at the end of the meeting for sure, but what I'm just saying is that I think if there's a formal request made, we can take it through that process, get somebody out there to make a determination if the tree is diseased or a nuisance. I'm not so sure that that's Mr. Kazarowski. I don't know if the borough has an arborist that we work with. I know we don't have one on staff.
We have contract personnel. Borough is our preferred vendor at this point that could come in and help the Shade Tree Commission. And there are numerous trees in the borough that are going to need to be addressed, and now that we have our eyes on it and the residents want action, we're going to be having code enforcement, identifying those nuisances, working with Shade Tree Commission to step up enforcement of the code. So for everybody in the room and out in the public, there will be pros and cons to enforcement. People will be upset that they are going to have to spend their resources to cut down the trees, but the trees do pose a hazard, and as we heard, we are prone to storms in western Pennsylvania, and it's just really good housekeeping. So you will see our code enforcement and Shade Tree Commission this fall very active in addressing these issues. And as with anything, like building condemnations, there is an appeal process, and we have to allow for the process to be facilitated so everybody gets a fair shake, so to speak.
Mr. President, can I have the floor?
Yes.
Can I ask Mr. Corville a question?
Yes.
How can we bypass the Shade Tree Commission in this instance?
My recommendation would not be to bypass that body. I mean, in the long run, you could change your ordinance so there's a different method, but this is the method that we are provided with under our current state of our ordinance.
And to your knowledge, are there arborists in Crafton that are on the Shade Tree Commission?
I have no idea who's on the Shade Tree Commission.
So we would in turn be handing off to some citizens to make a determination of whether the trees are diseased?
My understanding is that there's somebody that we work with that is able to investigate on behalf of the commission.
Correct. I see. So, you know, because the resident has indicated that the code slash public works slash interim manager had made had been to his property, is there any time frame that was started when that happened, or are we just pretending as though that didn't happen and starting from scratch essentially?
Well, let me tell you, it was April 21st, if I can just say something back here, and not wait till the end and forget everything I need to say. April 21st, the Park and Shade Tree Commission was sent a letter to them on July 28th, and they were formally sent a letter about these trees. So I don't know how much more, and this is in an email, so how much more can I do for you guys? And as that gentleman over there, he sounds like he really actually cares. But those ordinances actually pretty much do it in a speedily fashion. 2 days to get the freaking letter out, and 15 days to make an appeal, and 30 days to cut the tree down. So, I mean, how much more could I wouldn't ask anybody to do anything quicker than that, because it took me 2 or 3 weeks to get all those bids in from all those companies that I brought you guys last time.
I'm sure what the question was, but.
Well, my point is this, if the gentleman has already hired a tree specialist to come and ascertain whether or not the trees are
So,
sick,
Mr. Kraus, could you
we
please
have them.
define, sorry to interrupt, could you explain what your definition of a tree specialist is? Is this a licensed arborist?
So, this guy came last time here.
Correct.
And he made his point. I
Correct.
drove down to Maxwell Street the next day, looked at his trees, yeah, they need to be cut down. So, he already had someone come and give him an estimate. Those people cut down trees for a living. I think it would be pretty likely that they could make a determination on the spot whether the trees were sick, and tell him, hey, these trees are sick. So if somebody has already come down and done that, can't we just take that and use that and speed this process up for him?
So,
If there has been a complaint received that I'm not aware of until now, that is sent to the Shade Tree Commission, they can process it and ask somebody to look at the tree, our folks. It's not a good practice to take your word for it, all due respect, Mr. Krause, or some neighboring property owners. You have to have an arborist or some other qualified person review it, and then the notice has to go to the property owner whose responsibility it is. They have an opportunity to appeal or remove in 30 days, and then if not, the borough is then under ordinance permitted to go in and remove the tree. So if this process begins tomorrow, the borough could be in there as early as 30 days, if not sooner.
Well, let's get it going tomorrow, and let's get back to this guy and let him know what's going on with, what, we're in the process. Let's get it going, there shouldn't be any hold up. If the trees are there, they need removed, let's get them removed. Let's not waste any more time. And maybe our new manager could get back to the guy and say, look, here's where we are in the process, we are moving along. Don't you all think that's a pretty good idea to try to follow up on this?
So we have to discuss the business process moving forward. And it really illuminates an issue with the fact that there are multiple business processes that are lacking in the municipality. And we'll discuss more of them during the discussion feature of this meeting, but it just, we really need to make sure that we have a legal process that's fair to all private property owners and the borough. And so it's really important that you have a legal process, because with respects to private property issues, you could be opening the borough up to negligence or any other kind of cascading effect from removing the trees. So again, as much as we'd like to go onto private property, it's just as if it's a combination or a demolition. We have to follow the process, and we've illuminated through this summer that there really needs to be some efficiencies driven, and we're the people at the table here that are going to have to legislate that new process. So that's the purpose.
Yeah, Mr. President, I think we all agree that we have to follow processes. I think the issue here is that we have a gentleman who has been trying to follow those processes, and perhaps because certain people were wearing multiple hats, whatever, there was not a timely submission.
Well,
and I think that all any of us are asking is, can we have an assurance that there's going to be a timely submission to the Shade Tree Commission so that this will start moving forward. I think that's all. I mean, everyone understands the business, the legalities, the ordinances.
Right.
We just,
I understand, but we really need to get through the agenda items because these items, with regards to paper streets, the information that you received, you know, what.
that's not what's at issue here. All we're saying is, can we have an assurance either by our new manager?
Yes,
That
yes,
it's
but
going to move
the
forward
crux of
day
the
one
issue,
tomorrow.
but the crux of the issue is that the process is disjointed.
That's for us to
Disjointed.
solve going forward. For tonight, we have reviewed the ordinances, the process. The gentleman has been here, this is his second time here, and we failed to respond in a timely manner. So we're happy to work on the business processes and connect the dots, get the right people moving forward so this doesn't happen again. But the gentleman deserves a, yes, we hear you.
Yeah,
We'll
yes,
move
we
the process
hear,
forward. That's all we need.
we hear the public, and we understand, but first you have to understand who owns said tree.
We understand
Right,
that.
so
And
now
so
that
we're-
we have
Who
clarification,
does? Who owns it?
the property owners own it. The
Yeah.
borough
Do we
has
know who
no
that is?
jurisdiction over the paper streets.
Do we know who that is?
There are the adjoining owners.
That's all been stated.
That's who will receive the notification.
Yeah, well, why is there a disconnect? Sending that
I'm
notice.
saying, if you talked about the timelines, which that's the complaint, the timeline in which the process was laid out. There is not a Gantt chart, a flow chart that describes to the code enforcement officer or to the Shade Tree Commission and how the regulations work. And that's why we're gonna be working with the manager and working with the solicitor to lay it out so timelines are met. But we also have to understand, if people don't meet the timelines, right, and the borough is compelled to spend the resources, all right, there's a lot of competition for resources. So you have sewer issues, all right, you have road issues, and now we're addressing the fact that we also have shade tree issues, right? So now we have to figure out, we're going into the budget season, how many trees need to be cut down? Shade Tree Commission actually put forth a
We don't
proposal.
know at this point, excuse me. We understand all these things, we'll address all these things. The next step is to move it to the Shade Tree Commission to
Correct.
determine, and then to get the property owner to decide whether they're going to comply.
We
don't even
understand.
know, excuse me, we don't even know that we
No,
have
excuse
an
me,
issue.
no, excuse me. We already said we were going to follow the process. There is an assurance that we have the process laid out. That's why the solicitor wrote it out. It's all written out in your memo. That's the new process, all right? And that's what we are here to discuss, and that's what is going to be carried out by the new manager. So, with that being said, to the resident in the back, we went through hours of research to make sure that the new process was going to be facilitated in a way that there would be satisfaction, but it needs to be understood that it's a deliberative process. We can't just go onto people's properties and begin cutting down trees.
I don't want you to.
Correct.
If you came on my property and cut down, sent me a bill, I'd tell you, go to hell. All
Correct.
right? But that, you already have I don't know what you're making this so difficult about.
Yes.
This woman's
So-
trying to say you already have the stuff in possession. It says, send them the certified letter. Make sure you send it certified, honest.
Right.
And what's so hard about this? It's not
So-
gonna cost Crafton a dime.
It's just, hi. First thing I'm saying at this meeting. So, from the perspective of, borough administration, we come in tomorrow and we deal with what goes on at the meetings, right?
Yeah.
So tomorrow morning, I will come in, if I understood correctly the information that was shared about the code of ordinances, basically, when you identify an issue tree, you then submit to the Shade Tree Commission. They have 2 days to notify the property owner that there is an issue, correct?
Right.
Okay, so an issue, I think an issue that we've identified with the whole paper street thing is it was unclear until it was surveyed. I mean, you may say, well, clearly it's on that side.
I'm sorry, let me
which-
interject a second. That property's been surveyed for 25 years.
Okay.
When he came down, I showed him the survey markers.
Okay.
It was not unclear. He
Okay,
just didn't
so-
take no steps to figure out what
I
was the what.
apologize, I misunderstood
Okay,
that particular
I
part.
will
However,
give you that break.
I have been here for just a short time, so this is kind of a new issue that's coming across my desk. What I can say is tomorrow morning, I will get in, I will figure out exactly how we notify the Shade Tree Commission, start the 2 days tomorrow. And then after the conclusion of that 2 days, that they have to review, we'll
Okay,
move on
yeah.
to the 30-day notice period. So I can take care of that, at least going forward from
I
this
think that's all
point.
this gentleman was
Yeah.
asking for.
Thank
I
you.
mean, I'll give you this letter we sent to the Shade Tree Commission on July 28th.
Please,
so
yeah,
you
please
have
do, because
that.
I don't have a copy of it right
I
now.
will be happy to.
All right. So we're good on the 2 issues there, and if you'd like to make an announcement about.
Yeah, I did. I have one last thing in my report, and I'll also be working with RJ to assist with the preparation of the appropriate notices, if that's where I think we should go. The last thing I wanted to mention is that later in the agenda, our council is considering 2 separate zoning ordinances. One that has been discussed for several months, that will redefine tattoo parlor and body piercing establishments to establish one that is adult-oriented and one that is not. The adult-oriented use will be a conditional use in the industrial district, and the not adult-oriented tattoo and body piercing establishment will be permitted, a permitted use by right in the C1 and C2 districts. In addition, council is also voting on a rezoning, not a rezoning, but a revision to the zoning ordinance that will remove all commercial uses which are permitted as conditional uses and which are permitted elsewhere in the borough in the R1 and R2 districts. And that would include assisted living facilities, community service institutions, daycare centers, educational, religious, and philanthropic institutions, hospitals, or nursing homes in the Steuben Street overlay district. And that is applicable moving forward. It does not apply to issues or uses that are occurring today. It would apply moving forward. And it does amend the definition of daycare center in order to allow home-based daycare to continue. And that's an amendment to, second amendment to zoning. There are 2 separate ordinances that will require 2 separate motions for approval later today. But these are issues that council has been talking about for several months. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Moving forward, we have a presentation from the library board representatives. Address council, your name.
Good evening, Jerry Ionta, Secretary for the Crafton Public Library.
Megan Grabowski.
Thank you.
Phil, we sent you a PowerPoint, did you happen to load that, and can you put that up for us?
We have some copies over
Copies?
there. I do not know how to work that machine.
Okay.
If you'd like, I can put it on the screen if you want.
Sorry, if you could.
Yep, no problem.
We have a bunch over here.
So we were told this is to be short and sweet, so this will be short and sweet. I'm going to just spend a couple of minutes talking about what we have accomplished over the past 90 days since Megan last presented to you. And then Megan will talk about what our goals and plans are over the next 90 days until our next meeting. Also, really want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to present to you this evening. There's very few public libraries in Allegheny County that let their public library present to the local borough councils. So we really appreciate the opportunity for you to listen, because we're doing a lot of exciting things. While he brings that up, the first thing was the most important pressing issue that we had was to hire a new director. We did. Jessica Watson, her background is outstanding in the library industry. She also has a very good background in grant writing, which is one of the important criteria that we really wanted for the library director. Second thing was we rewrote the bylaws. We looked at best practices from other public libraries in the county to come up with the most recent ideas in bylaws for public libraries. We also, at pro bono, contracted with Jennifer Raybald, an attorney whose specialty is also in nonprofits and particularly public libraries. And she also has written bylaws for public libraries. So our new library bylaws are done, and they're posted for anybody who wants to look at them. We established policy requiring background checks on all potential library board members. We want to provide background checks prior to being even interviewed or considered for the board. The next thing was we created a confidentiality, ethics, and a conflict of interest agreement to be signed by all trustees. These are all best practices that public library boards generally have, and so we've adopted those. Those are in the process of being reviewed right now by our council, and as soon as they're completed, will be posted for your review. Exciting thing that we did was the 7 of us, the board is 7 members, and all 7 trustees attended a 4-hour session 3 Saturdays ago from 8 in the morning until noon on BoardWorks, which was a session through Robert Morris's continuing education program that provided us best practice skills on being an effective board member, particularly in public libraries. 2 new things, the 2 next things coming up we're really excited about. The first one is we were selected as an Inquire Within site partnering with WQED. Inquire Within it was one library in the county a year is given the opportunity to have this program. The value is $10,000. It's paid for by FedEx's nonprofit foundation. We were chosen among all of the libraries in the county to get this. It's to provide STEM, which for those of you that don't know is science, technology, education, and mathematics programming for children ages 2 to 8. This is a 12-month program, again, in conjunction with WQED, will be conducted and hosted here at the library. The next thing that we're thrilled about was that we received a charitable contribution through FedEx Ground for $10,000. We haven't gotten a check yet, should be coming fairly soon, but we, along with Jennifer, Jennifer will be using the money for non-traditional lending items and other capital items that the library needs. 3 things for RJ, for we look forward to working with you in the future, is that we recently submitted a request to the borough manager for dedicated parking spots for library patrons. As we continue to increase traffic in the library, it's very important to maintain traffic in the library because that has to do with the funding that you get through the state. And one of the things that the grant is going to provide is a counter gate, so we can accurately keep track of how many people do come in the library.
It's not a grant.
Oh, it's not a grant, it's a contribution. Contribution, not a
Charitable contribution.
Charitable contribution, not a grant. So we need more. The next thing is that we've requested a copy of the lease, but we've been told by the former borough manager that there is no lease. So we would like to see a lease to have our legal counsel look at that. And then finally, we're still waiting on some repairs to the exterior foundation of the library. And last but not least,
The men's restroom as well.
the men's restroom, the urinal doesn't flush. And last but not least is the new logo. We just created a new logo, which will be on all of our promotional material moving forward. So that's what we've accomplished in the last 90 days. We've been very busy. This is all volunteer. People are working very hard at this. So again, we appreciate you giving us a chance to speak. Now, Jennifer will talk about what our goals are.
I'm going to talk about the goals.
Or, I'm sorry, Megan.
Can we ask some questions?
Sure.
here? All right, so you hired a new director, is this a full-time director?
No, part.
Okay, can you tell us about that?
What do you mean?
What would you like to know?
Like
Would you like
me,
to-
Jessica?
Yes.
Jessica?
How
Can we
much
also
time?
add the changes that have been done to the library staff, why those changes were necessary, who's full-time, who's not full-time, and why those decisions were made? That would go.
That would be community comments that can be asked at the end of the meeting, or could have been asked at the beginning of the meeting had you signed up. So let's hear a little
Yes,
bit about
sure.
our part-time director.
Yes, Jennifer,
and
please.
How that works.
Hi, my name's Jessica. So
Jessica, I'm sorry.
We'll start there. My name's Jessica Watson. I am the new part-time director at the Crafton Public Library. The Crafton Public Library shares directorial services with the Coriopolis Library, which I am also the director. Which does fall under the requirements of Brad to have a at least part-time director at your library to continue to receive RAD funding.
So how much time are you devoting to our library?
I am 20 hours at Crafton and I am 20 hours at Coriopolis.
Okay. And can the board give us some insight into why we've dropped back to a part-time director instead of the full-time director that we've had for so many years?
Funding.
Yes. Primarily, it was the cost of a very qualified full-time director was exceeded the money that we had for it.
Okay. So, all right, thank you for that.
Also, just a question from the back is that personnel, staff, and the operation of the library is under the auspices of the library director and not under the board.
However, to follow up on that, there have been a lot of calls to the council and various other people asking about the changes that have been made. I understand that a gentleman that just a few months ago you made a full-time offer to has been let go, and another longtime staff person has been cut back to much fewer hours. Is that again a financial decision?
Again, the day-to-day operation of the library is up to the library director and does not have anything to do with the library board.
Excuse me.
So that answer would be addressed or answered by the library director.
That's fine, if someone would like to.
I was getting ready to, so my apologies for being a little slow. Mr.
Rich?
Mr. Rich, because bless him, I've never been able to say his last name and he laughs at me. He decided to leave us. He was not asked to go. It was something that he had decided that he wanted to do. He was given another opportunity. And he's a very talented librarian. And I could ask, have wrapped arms around him and said, please don't go, but that's not fair to him. So there was a decision that was made that we have 2 full-time staff. We have a librarian and a library assistant. And all clerical staff are now part-time. This is partially a financial decision. It's also an hour decision. We did not have enough funding to keep the extended hours, which I know had been very popular.
So I want to know what happened to the finances of the borough. You may or may not know that I was on the library board for 4 years, up to the beginning of this year. And I'm quite familiar with what that budget looks like.
Sure.
And all along, in the last few months, all we've been seeing is a 4 or 5 line financial statement that only talks about variance, and it doesn't give us the kind of information that the board of directors used to get every month. A line item financial showing budget and year-to-date.
It's my understanding that up until my start, Rich had given you all 9 documents that were provided by the ACLA.
And what I am wondering is why the change, since ACLA was doing the financials. We used to get line item every month. And ever since the beginning of the year, when everything went topsy-turvy and all the changes got made, we're not seeing line item budgets. And so then we hear that we have financing issues. We go to a 2.5-day library director. We lose a full-time person. We get another one that has been almost full-time cut back. And I just don't, unless something has happened to the RAD finances, I don't understand this.
So the difference right now is, to be honest, right now we are at the current staffing levels that were previous to, my understanding is November of 2017. We're at 2 full-time staff members and 1 part-time clerk. That's where we are. I don't, to be honest, in open session feel comfortable talking about specific people because they're not here to speak for themselves, and that is a private matter. So I don't want to say like X person is this.
That's fine, but I'm wondering
The reality,
about the finances.
I understand, but at the moment, when I started, we had 4 full-time staff members. When you take a look at the finances for the same amount of time, 4 full-time staff members eats up a lot of your budget for the remaining of the year. That is something that we are handling. We were able to absorb it. There were a few things that were reallocated. Some of it is offset by the charitable contribution. Things could be reassessed. So we are not going to be over budget. Our RAD funding has not taken a hit, which is very lovely. And we are going forward with staffing levels of November of 2017.
So can you reiterate exactly what those staffing levels are?
I
and
have
number of
2
hours?
full-time staff members. I have a librarian, and I have a library assistant, and I have a part-time clerk. We are in the process of getting ready to hire a part-time children's librarian, which will bring us back to the appropriate staffing levels that I think is to move this library forward.
So is Michelle the part-time clerk then, and Alyssa is the part-time librarian?
She is the full-time librarian.
Oh, I'm sorry, full-time. Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
And then Tracy obviously is the.
Is the library assistant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
So
you.
moving forward, if you would please just tell us exactly what you want us to submit to you on a monthly basis, or to tell Jennifer.
Jessica?
Jessica, I'm sorry. We will.
Well, one of the things that would be really useful is to see a real financial statement.
May I ask one question?
Mhm.
Why you would need to see a full financial statement? I'm happy to provide one, but considering we're a 501c3, was wondering why that was something that was,
The borough provides a significant amount of your financial support, and that's been available to us in the past. And I see no reason why we should not be able to have it going forward.
Okay. Thanks.
You guys sound like you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.
September is Love Your Library Month, and the Jack Buncher Foundation for the 3rd year in a row is matching donations made to the library. So if you're able to make a contribution, we have a letter campaign going out right now to community residents, and I have some buttons and window flames that I want to share with everybody here tonight.
It's a card, it's a card.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you had another page
Excuse me, Mr. Young.
presentation?
Sir,
Yes, we do.
quick question.
Yeah.
You mentioned the lease, you think you haven't got a copy of it. What lease are you referring to? So that we know that.
the lease to the library.
Lease to the library. Megan,
So,
you gonna do
so wait a minute.
your part?
Um,
No, we're still
Why
out.
would there be a lease involved when the library has gotten free rent? And we just give them that space since this building has been,
Just ask for the clarification.
okay, yeah, I guess I'm confused about the request. I mean, there's
So-
no cost. The municipality has granted that space since this community building has been open.
Excuse me, one of the reasons that we were requesting a lease goes back to, was it March or April of this year when I had submitted a request for certain repairs that needed done in the library. And I had asked to have a copy of the lease provided so that moving forward in the future, when certain things occurred in the library, maintenance issues, types of repairs, we knew whether we needed to come to the borough to have that addressed, or if it was something that we could do on our own. Besides, it's not about whether there's rent or not. We're residing in this building, and it would be good to know under what terms and conditions.
That's fair.
Thank you.
And did you want me to talk about the
I
goals?
would, I would love for you to finish your presentation.
Okay.
And just for council's notice, we will have an executive session at the end of this meeting to discuss real estate matters. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll be really quick. I just wanted to talk about, in the future, we have some fundraising coming up, and first I mentioned was September Love Your Library Month. There's a campaign right now. Jack Buncher Foundation is offering matches up to $500 for donations made to the library in the month of September. We have 2 events, a tea on September 22nd and also a Halloween party October 20th. Those tickets can be purchased in the month of September. That would count as a donation. That could be matched to the public library. The Halloween party is also 21 plus. It's the first time Crafton Library, to my knowledge, is hosting an over 21 Halloween party. So I'm looking forward to that and hope to see some of you there. Moving forward in the future, very near future, we hope to prove good on our promise to move the Historical Society collection down into the library. We also have developed some ad hoc committees to address some of the library's immediate needs, such as fundraising, strategic issues. So we are working on that. Reestablishing a Friends of the Library to assist with fundraising, hopefully developing a teen advisory board, creating a board improvement checklist so that we can keep ourselves check and balance. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can I ask a question real quick before they
Yeah.
Either someone on the board or maybe the executive director can answer this, but do you guys have any numbers of how many Ingram residents are using Crafton's facilities off the top of your head?
We don't split them out. We are, at the moment, we do not split them out.
Okay.
And to do so right now, to say like X amount of people who live in Ingram use our library and check out X amount of numbers of materials is a breach of privacy.
I'm just curious, how many board members have library cards? Okay, so for those of you that do, you probably are aware that that's a county card. So most libraries don't determine where you live if you have an active card. It gives you access to all the libraries in the county. So
That being said, we are the home library of Ingram. And one of the things that we are looking
You are
for.
not. Please do not say that you are not.
Okay, my question was just going towards, have you guys thought about reaching out maybe to see if they're interested in funding the library as well?
Please maintain order.
I am looking, I started July 1st, so
No, I know.
I'm very excited to be here. It is on my plan to reach out to Ingram to speak to them.
Yeah, because if there's, I understand the library book issue is not really what I was driving at, but like, let's say if there's toddler story time or Lego night or whatever, yoga night, residents coming and using,
Absolutely.
so.
And that's what we want to be.
Right, and we're so close that it would make zero sense for them not to be using it.
Absolutely.
We know that they do, so being that they have their own, budget and money to spend, I mean, I don't think it's unfair to say, hey, why don't we try to work more in tandem to see if you can also help out here?
Sure. It's my understanding that hasn't happened in the past, but I'm very happy to reach out and have that happen in the future.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both for coming this evening. I really appreciate it. On behalf of council. All right. Moving forward with our business agenda, under administration, the manager proceed.
All right, so I have a couple different, yes? Oh, yeah. I have a couple different topics to discuss this evening. The first one is regarding a scholarship that we actually received from Connect, which is the Congress of Neighboring Communities. It's an intergovernmental cooperation organization that we participate in, which I think is a really great forum. Since they knew that I was coming on board, they were kind enough to reach out and say, hey, I know that your borough is interested in transit-oriented development, sort of focusing on how we can best utilize our land resources around things like the West Busway. So there's this great conference that's actually being hosted in Pittsburgh this year called Railvolution, which is all focused on transit-oriented development. There are scholarships available through the conference. So the Port Authority and Connect kind of are working in tandem on this TOD, as it's called, sort of policy push. And so because we do have a pretty major transit line running through, they offered us a full attendance scholarship for the registration fee. So that's a $595 value. The conference runs towards the end of October, about 4 days. The Sunday activities are kind of, welcome to Pittsburgh sort of stuff. But the next 3 days are what I've been told are some really great classes, seminars, walking tours, different things like that regarding transit-oriented development. It's been going for about 20 years, and I've never attended since it tends to be all over the country, but I've heard really good things. So whoever ends up representing us each of the days, I'm sure that we'll learn a ton, and we're very grateful to Connect and the Port Authority for working together with us to make sure that we're able to attend. So, finding money already, right? So the second item that I have in my reporting, there's a third kind of last minute addendum after this regarding some of the resources available to victims of the June 20th flood, just FYI. But so the second item that I have on here is I was asked to provide a little bit of information as to our code enforcement, zoning enforcement activities. This upcoming meeting, since this is sort of, we're getting a little more active on it, and you may see Susan, out in the community, or Rob, working on that. So we're learning how to use, the GIS online software that we were fortunate to have designed by us for those interns. And we will be having some GIS consultants popping by this week just to sort of figure out how we're utilizing, being able to look at the different things entered into the system and make sure that we're getting the most out of it. But in the meantime, just some of the brief things that I was able to pull from the system as I sort of learned it on the fly this week is that, the primary enforcement activities are mostly grass and weed complaints, sort of overgrown property. And the good news is that most of those don't really have to progress past the first notice stage. We have a lot of people that are complying once they get sort of the door hanger first notice. The other couple top categories are, there's sort of this other catch-all that mostly ends up being large appliances, like if a washer or dryer gets left in somebody's yard. So that's the second most enforced category. The third one is if there are any issues with sidewalks and driveways, if they're in such a state of disrepair that it could pose a safety hazard. And then the final one is just sort of smaller garbage on property and litter. So only one citation at this point has had to be issued, which is great. You never want to have to take someone to the magistrate if you can just sort of solve it in a more amicable way. So yeah, they're working really hard, and they're doing a lot, and I've been impressed with sort of the resources and the effort that I've come into just in these couple weeks. So if you have any more questions that I can answer at this point, I'm more than happy to, but in general, I'll probably be providing sort of an occasional update on how the code enforcement activities are going. So this last item that I have, I left a couple copies of this news release over on sort of the general stuff table over there. So I was sent this by the U.S. Small Business Administration, just to let people know that anyone that had damages that was caused by the flooding on June 20th and 21st, that they are able to apply potentially. We're one of the declared counties for a disaster area, basically. You can apply for Small Business Administration disaster loan assistance. So I just put that out there for anybody who might, have been particularly affected. The deadline to apply for these loans, which I guess are for repairs for businesses, private nonprofit, or homeowners and renters with kind of these lower interest rates. If you apply by September 24th, you may be eligible. So if you're here and you need one of those sheets, feel free to grab one. If you need that information and you're not here or we run out, feel free to contact the borough office and we'll make sure that you get a copy of the release. So that's everything for the administration section tonight.
All right, thank you. Moving forward with Public Works, the borough is working with Char West Cog on a pre-application for CDBG Year 45 funds. The borough is requesting funding for the installation of ADA compliant curb ramps at several intersections.
Sure, so I've been in contact with the sort of community development coordinator, staff person at the Char West COG. This is a program that we, the COG tries to get everybody to at least submit one thing every year. We went for some ADA accessible curbs and ramps surrounding the municipal building to improve accessibility sort of from the Steuben Street corridor and surrounding the traffic circle. There were a couple curb ramps that were repaired just in the repaving of the traffic circle, I believe. So we removed that one ramp from what we had requested but not received last year. And I believe we replaced it with another ramp that was along that sort of accessibility corridor that would connect, what I know is the Pike, but maybe you call Steuben Street up here, to the Borough building. So that's in the pre-app phase. The COG facilitates applying to the county for this grant. We're requesting a total of, I believe, $28,000, which is 80% of the program project, should it be awarded, and then the borough would provide a 20% match. And I believe there are 10 ramps in total that we're requesting.
In particular, there was comment on the intersection of Sterrett and Bar, so that issue is being addressed hopefully through this grant. If not, we'll find other funding. So with that being said, I propose a motion to approve resolution number 2018-12 authorizing the execution and delivery of a master equipment lease purchase agreement and PNC equipment finance. And this is going back to the truck lease that we discussed at the last meeting where we approved the interest rate. So moved.
Second.
Moved.
All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, all that opposed? Motion carries. Moving forward, a motion to approve the administrative agreement with the South Hills Area Council of Governments, SHACOG, for the SHACOG Joint O&M Point Repair Project, Year 7. So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All that opposed? Motion carries. A motion to approve the administrative agreement with the South Hills Area Council of Governments for the SHACOG Joint O&M Preventive Maintenance Project, Year 8. So moved.
Second.
Hearing any discussion?
Next year be year 8,
So, the way that these joint bid projects work is not necessarily all of them go out for joint bid every year. It kind of just depends on how many municipalities sign up to participate. So some of them are on year 8, whereas some of them would be on year 7, or, you know, whatever year for that particular type.
And from what I understand, the engineer will be coming in at the end of the month to give us more detail. We're gonna be talking about the consent order and the master plan for our sewer system. So we're gonna be kicking off that conversation on the capital improvement plan. And obviously, these expenditures tie into the overall plan for the next coming years. Did I hear any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All that opposed? Motion carries. Make sure that reading the correct one here. Motion to approve the administrative agreement with the South Hills Area Council of Governments, SHACOG, the SHACOG Joint O&M, CCTV, inspection and cleaning, Year 8.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All that opposed? Motion carries. A motion to approve pay application number 3 from Standard Pipe Services LLC for the 2017 manhole rehab project in the amount of $90,551.20 as recommended by the borough engineer. This will be the final pay application for this project.
So moved.
Second. Hearing any discussion?
Is there a list, are they all done, we're just paying for it, or is there more, is there gonna?
So in the engineer's report, they forwarded what they had worked on and the work's been completed. And again, in the discussion that we had with the engineer and with the solicitor last week, you know, we're gonna be going into more detail with council so we can clearly understand where the work's occurring and we can understand how we're going to fit the SHACOG agreements into the master plan.
Okay.
Any other questions? Hearing no additional conversation, all in favor?
Aye.
All that opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to planning and zoning. A motion to adopt ordinance number 1647, amending chapter 225 of the Crafton Borough Code of Ordinances and Zoning.
So moved.
Seconded.
Hearing any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All that opposed? Motion carries. A motion to adopt ordinance number 1648, amending chapter 225 of the Crafton Borough Code of Ordinances, zoning.
So moved. Seconded.
Hearing any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All that opposed? Motion carries. Moving forward to discussion items. Code Appeals Board meeting request for 1664 Crafton Boulevard. In our council packets, there was a letter from a resident. Does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns about the letter that was received?
I do, yes.
Mr. Kraus, you have the floor.
So, did we get something from Dan Felton that indicates, so, let me backtrack. Was this building condemned, yes or no?
Yes, yes, yep,
So,
received condemnation.
So where is that, and what exactly is wrong with the structure that was initially condemned?
So if we go back to the file, and then we'll have that file.
I can
Go back.
go
Yep.
tomorrow. Yeah, so, you know, I was not here for the original condemnation notice, but I can follow up on it tomorrow and get you some more information as to what's
This
right
is one of the three properties that we condemned, all for various but similar reasons, that they were in a condition that the
I'm the owner of the property,
of 1664.
and I put together that schedule as well.
So Mr. Felton determined that it was in the condition where it was a danger to health, safety, welfare, it could be condemned and demolished. And so what this gentleman has done is submitted a letter saying, I have a plan to rehab the property in order to save it from demolition. And that's what I think Mr. Lavasser is bringing up to council at this point. But I can't explain exactly what issue were with that specific property. I'm not sure.
So Steve, Mr. Corbel,
Yeah.
if you could explain to council, now that we have this letter, what actions can this council take in a legal matter to move forward with the condemnation or withdraw from the condemnation? Or can a condemnation even be revoked or pulled, or the determination overturned? Or let's say the condemnation can be overturned through action by the owner? What is the process?
So the condemnation exists and will continue to exist until our building inspector is satisfied that the property no longer needs to be condemned. From a demolition standpoint, the property owner and our building inspector should meet and review the plans that have been submitted. And the building inspector should be satisfied that the repairs that are being made would make the property habitable again and not a subject for demolition, and ultimately could revoke the condemnation. Typically in these instances where somebody comes forward and says, hey, I'm willing to make these repairs, I suggest that you work with the individual, set firm timelines through letters, etc., and if they're not adhered to, the borough then can continue down the path of demolition. But at this point, I did review the letter and the attachments. I was impressed with the submission from the perspective that typically you just get a letter that says, please don't tear down this structure, I'm gonna fix it, and you don't have any more details. This seemed to be a little more well thought out than what you usually see. So my suggestion would be to make sure that Mr. Felton gets together with this individual as soon as possible, and a plan is agreed upon and it's confirmed in writing, and if things aren't completed in a timely manner as agreed to, then we would continue down the path of demolition.
Do I still have the floor?
Yes.
So, I'm, like, the only issue that I particularly have with this, it's not working with an individual who's trying to to right or wrong, which I'm 100% behind that, it's what, aside from, this seems a little ambitious in my mind, at least from the perspective of the street, how the building is in disrepair. So that was my reasoning for wanting to see a more detailed report to see exactly what was going on the inside, to then kind of look at this and say, is this something that can be done, or do we need to continue on the path that we're on, essentially?
Can you break down the code appeals board?
So in the letter, there was an opportunity to file an appeal to the borough's Code of Appeals Board under our UCC Board of Appeals Authority. We can process it through that entity and then make the agreement through that entity. I don't know if we have an active or appointed board in that respect. I think we do. But we can also work with the property owner outside of that system as well.
All right. Well, do I hear any other conversation about this property, and is there any willingness of this council to move forward, or do we just move forward with a reference of a Code of Appeals Board? Should we allow that type of process to move forward, or we interject ourselves?
I feel that we should really listen to what he is making a proposal on. I think he's done a wonderful job, as Mr. Corbel has said. And I feel that someone should be given a chance. He has been out of the area, unfortunately. He had renters that just totally trashed the place.
So I'm going to ask the gentleman who wrote the letter, who owns the property, to please come forth and address council to discuss.
I'm sorry, I'm pretty hard to hear. So I didn't hear it.
I'm asking that you come forth, since your item is on the agenda. I would like you to address council and explain the situation, because we have to make a decision with the process.
Okay. Actually, the reason that I have not maintained the property for a period of time is when I, approximately 7 years ago, I tried to rent it, or I had a renter coming in. The plumbing had been torn out, and the utilities, basically the sinks, and that's the way it is right now. There is no structural damage. There's no structural settlement. I was surprised. As soon as I received this letter, I went to the site, and I went to my house and assessed that there's nothing there. I called Baker Waterproofing prior to that to meet me there, because I thought, well, maybe with all this water there was some kind of issue with the foundation.
How about the roof, may I ask?
Excuse me?
How about the roof, may I ask?
The roof is 10 years old. It's got modified bit underlayment under the entire roof. There's no problems with the roof. There's no leaks. There's a roof hatch that when I arrived, someone had removed. Someone's been getting into it, into the building prior to me being there recently, the day after this notice. And I boarded up the window. I found the one window that he was accessing, or she was accessing, whoever. And I boarded that up from the inside so that nobody could take anything out. And they wouldn't have access anywhere to do anything like that. I purchased a lot of materials, and I have been purchasing a lot of materials throughout the course.
May I ask, are you aware that this council is taking into consideration a vacant property ordinance?
Excuse me?
Are you aware that this borough is taking into consideration a vacant property ordinance?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, this demonstrates to council and to the community why it's important that we address vacant properties for the protection of the property owners and for the community. When we have vacant properties, things such as vandalism, nuisance, pests, there's a lot of reasons why we need to keep up with the properties. And in this instance, you know, your property being deemed to be in a state by the building inspector to be condemnable is unfortunate, but I think council should take this opportunity to work with you. And obviously, we're gonna have to adhere to timeline, so I'd like to take this conversation offline and move forward with the manager, with the solicitor, and we will be discussing the path forward here. Thank you. Moving forward with the community garden signage. Does anybody have any comments about the request? No? All right. So I'm gonna
I
move.
have a question.
Go ahead.
In the letter, it states that there's been vandalism at the community garden. Do we have any more indication of how much vandalism or what?
I don't know if the mayor has any information. We'll ask the mayor, speak with the chief and see if there's any information, and then at the next meeting, we'll move forward with an action. Does that sound reasonable, or do we need to take action this evening?
No, it sounds reasonable. It's just concerning to me that there seems to, by this, be, some, vandalism anywhere here is a problem.
So, with this, I mean, as the manager and I have just remarked, it's fun to move forward with the signage.
Yeah, I don't think there's any official
Yeah.
action necessary to approve as long as council's okay.
Yeah.
The request.
I don't think it really requires a motion, as long as everybody's in the loop. Okay. We also received a letter of interest for the civil service. So we can take action this meeting or then at the next meeting. Was there a date, deadline for this? So if everybody's received this, let's make the appointment at the next meeting. Okay? All right, moving forward to community announcements. RJ, if you'd like to.
Oh, me? Okay. All right, so we got just a couple things for the different community events going on sent in to us. One is the Crafton Awake Fall Poetry Series, which I understand is maybe a recurring event every year. So it will be held Wednesday, September 12th, starting at 6:30 p.m. through 8 at the Crafton Library. Couple other things that we received from State Representative Dan Deasy's office. One is a job fair that's going to be hosted by him and a couple other local reps in the area, and so the date for that is September 27th. It is going from 4 to 7 p.m. at the VFW. I'm sure that I'm going to mispronounce this name, Vesley, would that be it? It's post 418, so that's at 1242 Chartiers Avenue in McKees Rocks. The other event that his office has going is a Veterans Outreach Clinic. There are a couple of those happening over the fall, September 1st, October 19th, and November 16th, which are all Fridays, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. This is in partnership with Congressman Mike Doyle, and these clinics are going to be held at Representative Deasy's district office, which I can certainly provide an address for, I can get, but I think that's something that you probably just, it's a standard office in the area that you could look up. So that's everything that I have for the events and announcements this meeting.
Thank you. And the solicitor would like to take a moment to make a point of clarification on an issue with regards to shade trees and properties, regarding what we were trying to say earlier, the point of clarification.
Well, I don't think, I just want to make sure that everybody's clear that I wasn't in particular outlining the process to say anything other than we're gonna take this gentleman's complaint through the process as quickly as we can. And that means this manager and I will work to ensure that someone's out there to review to confirm the tree is diseased, and we'll send the appropriate notification to the adjoining property owners, and we'll be moving that through as quickly as possible. And to the extent that anybody misunderstood, I do apologize.
Thank you. At this time, would anybody that has additional citizen comments raise their hand and address council? Mr. Whitmer?
Yes.
You could just, again, just state your name.
Brian Whitmer, 448 Maxwell Street. I first want to start out by apologizing to the library people for putting everybody in such a foul mood at the beginning. That's why I wanted to be at the end, all right? Because I wasn't, everything kind of was like, ew, after that.
We love you anyway, it's fine.
All right. First of all, I live at 448 Maxwell Street, and I'd like to ask one of your council members here, who actually represents me?
We're at large.
Is that person here?
Everybody.
Everybody.
Oh, at large. I thought you had your own individual wards. Is that, that doesn't happen anymore? Okay. Well, after 25 years, I kind of quit voting, so I don't know anyway. So, I just want to make sure, you folks are elected officials, correct? And then the borough zoning guy here, he is put in place by you folks, correct? That means you're in charge of hiring and firing, right? I just want to make sure that you understand that this individual, whether he knows his job or not, I want you to find out whether he does. Because I just want this one thing done, and I'll be out of your hair. As I stood in the cul-de-sac of my freaking house with him and Season about a week and a half ago, looking again at these trees, and and I thought, oh my God, I think something's gonna happen, because I gave you guys all those bids, and he turned to Season and said to her, well, you know what, I forget the company's name, somebody in Brookline. He said, well, their bid was only $2,600. Why don't we just call them up, have the trees removed, and then send the bills out to the property owners? Well, if he ever did that to me, he'd get the bill back, and I'd tell him to go fly a kite, because you can't go determine that somebody can't find a cheaper bid. All right, so that should have never been stated. So I was all excited. Needless to say, the next day I get the email from the solicitor, or unless it was, he addressed the solicitor and the solicitor sent it to him, and then he sent it to me, that, okay, about this paper street. I have never gave a shit about this paper street. It's just about who owns the trees, all right? I am, as a taxpayer of Crafton, super happy that it's a paper street, and super happy that somebody else owns the tree. And I'm happy because my tax dollars don't have to pay to remove these trees. I just want the ordinances to work the way they are, all right? So as I'm standing there, to add salt to my wound, all right, now remember, this started back April 21st. He goes and looks at my brand new driveway that I just spent blood, sweat, and tears digging up and installing. And he said to me, well, did you get a permit for that driveway? All right? So I'm asking you as the council members of Crafton, do I need a permit to redo my driveway? And the reason I wish he was here, because I wanted to pinpoint him down, whether he's following Crafton's laws, PA laws, or just some made up fictitious stuff, or let me give you the one here, the International Property Maintenance Code, which you state in your stuff that that's one of the things you follow. But PA code, and I'm just going to let you folks know this, so if you ever want to replace a driveway and you're doing it to code, you don't need Crafton's approval to do it. It's right here in Pennsylvania section 403.42. A permit is not required for the exception listed. And I'm going to skip all the things there are exceptions, and one of them is V, or Roman numeral 5. Sidewalks and driveways not more than 30 inches above grade and that are not located over a basement or story below in and which are not part of an accessible roof. So, yes, if he knows his stuff, then he should know that I don't need a permit to just redo my driveway. If not, I guess I'll be calling the solicitor or calling everybody else in Crafton's, aggravate them, that if I want to change my commode or something. You know what I mean? This is the reasons why we have codes. You just go look and see what's appropriate and not appropriate. All right, I'm done with that. Next thing is I want to thank Season and for getting rid of the problem grass next to me. And they were obviously diligent and they got that property and finally mowed their grass. And let me put it this way, they had to bring a farm tractor in with a brush hog. Okay, that's pretty freaking disgusting, because that's the only way they can mow this. All right, we're talking farm tractor 4-H shit. It was that bad, all right? So, now, the next thing is, my tax dollars are being spent on stuff, this is the real important part. So, they came down and all these weeds were hanging over the street, and it's some knotweed. So, I find out it's another part of your ordinances that you can't have the stuff hanging in the street. So what did Crafton do? They sent 3 people down. Now my tax dollars to cut down all this knotweed, which should be eradicated because it's part of a weed in Pennsylvania that they don't want. So the property owner should be out there spraying this stuff to kill it. Not to chop it down, but to kill it. But yet Crafton Borough spent my tax dollars on this brush hog freaking property to come out down there and cut all this stuff down. Why is my money being spent to do this? All right. Then she got another letter about the dead tree that fell on Ingram Avenue, which is the side of Crafton. So it wasn't Crafton, it wasn't the city of Pittsburgh, right across from Braddock. So what did our borough maintenance guys do? They came down and they chopped, they came down, I'm literally removing my 77-foot driveway one piece at a time, by hand. And they pull up in a dump truck and a backhoe with a pincher on the end. I don't know what you call it, a claw. And instead of them, these trees were so dead, all the dude did was snap, grabbed it, it broke, and instead of them actually, with a dump truck sitting there, instead of putting it in the dump truck, what did they do? They just deposited it in the freaking tree line. All right? Now, if that was my property and I did that, you guys would be calling me up, hopefully, and telling me to get this stuff removed. But they should have never been there. That's, again, my tax dollars taking care of the brush hog guy's property. I mean, why do my tax dollars have to pay to have these trees crushed down? Now, it's funny, Mr. Solicitor, they took care of those trees, but yet they don't want to take care of these. Now, believe me, don't get me wrong. Those trees should have been removed by the property owner, just like this knotweed should have been removed by the property owner because it faces an abating street, or whatever you call it, a curbside. Right? These are all your ordinances that are sitting in here. You guys need to just quit being Mr. Nice Guy and start telling these property owners to clean their messes up. I want to drive through Crafton and not look at a pigsty. All right, and I've worked hard as hell on my property to make it look good. Why can't we do that with the rest of the people?
We agree with you.
All right, well, I mean, this should have never got this far with me. All right, it really shouldn't.
Thank you for your patience, and we are working on our business processes. I'd like to address the audience and council. Now that we have a full-time manager who fully embraces technology, specifically our GIS system, we're going to be putting in a work order system. There will be numerous processes to document issues. We're about to launch the website that is about done. The manager's putting her final touches on that. There is a lot of progress being made. We appreciate everybody's patience with working with us, providing their feedback, and everybody coming down to these meetings and telling us how they feel and what they think is really important, and that's why we have these meetings. So I don't want you to stop coming to the meetings. I want to see you come to the meetings, provide your comments, send emails, let us know what your thoughts are, because we are actively engaging with the public and improving the process. So with that, I'd like to move to adjournment.
I have one more thing.
Go ahead.
Can we hire someone to do crosswalks? Steuben Street is still, there's no crosswalks.
Would you ask for it?
We can have
You would like-
our company to come in and do the crosswalk.
Well, that is something that we
It's,
can take up with the manager and the director of public works, look at the cost benefit of that.
won't you, until they get done. It's crazy. Since August, we've been waiting for crosswalks.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, our council president just mentioned how we're gonna be making use of GIS systems, was for those who are unfamiliar, I know we've been saying GIS a lot lately, so, if you look at the maps behind all of you on the walls there, maps don't look like that anymore, right? You know, you see a map of the United States and all the states are colored fun colors, and you can see very clearly where boundaries end and begin, and you can see a road map very clearly, right? So all of those things are made on this program called ArcGIS. I happen to love building maps. So I've been trying to think about ways to use this program so that we can kind of more effectively deal with things like if a road needs repair, or if we need to maintain a sidewalk, or there are tree roots that are, you know, cracking the curb or something like that. And so something that I've been considering using GIS for is maybe sitting down with a couple people that are familiar with the walking paths and really figuring out where we can most benefit from some sort of pedestrian, you know, traffic encouragement, traffic controls to make sure that people are watching out for people that would like to cross the street. So that's definitely something that's high on my priority list for when we're making maps. You know, what are the useful things we can do.
Can't we start with the ones that Sam Phillips stole?
Well, so-
Linwood, it's like,
So, Councilwoman Dammons, I believe this week would be a good week to have a ride along with the manager and point out areas. And I encourage every member of council to make time to work with the manager, point out areas of concern that you heard from your constituents, and we're gonna build out our list of tasks that we'd like to accomplish this fall and winter. There's a lot to do. Public Works is being requested to do a lot of different things, and so therefore, the manager and the director of Public Works will have to prioritize and address those issues. And now that we have these guidance documents that have been put together by the solicitor, we have a clear outline of what that business process needs to look like, as to who's responsible for what, when, where, and why. So with that, the manager will be facilitating our business and our agenda. And we will continue to listen we as council members need to listen to our constituents and email, the manager, the director of public works, and myself to make sure that there's any legislative or budgetary issue that has to be addressed as we enter budget season, that we figure out how we're going to address it. With the memo that was provided to you, it has become abundantly clear that we're going to have to augment our shade tree budget. And therefore, we're gonna have to take a hard look at that, because it's become very clear to us that we have a lot of aging and dead trees that need to be addressed. We have property issues that need to be demarcated, and as those issues come up, we have to look at urgency and priority. And I'm really excited to work with RJ to help this council do that. And I noticed I sort of jumped ahead here to adjourn the meeting. Was there anybody else in the comment?
Yes.
Kathleen Watson, 74 Fountain Street. I don't know if you're aware of it when you come from Canevin under the underpass and make a left. And start going around the bend before you hit Fountain.
Big tree.
There is a big tree that came off of the cliffs and it is laying there. That was yesterday. I kind of figured that nobody got to it because there wasn't a Steeler game. But it was still there tonight when I came. I mean, I just don't know why it's still there.
I agree. And then the city came out and fixed the underpass again. They came out and got that done yesterday.
I mean,
So-
it's washed off the hills, it uprooted. It's probably not gonna be any one, there's gonna be more coming down.
Yeah.
Is it on the street?
Yeah, sorry?
It's on the street?
Oh, it's blocking the one whole way. They did come out obviously yesterday and just put horses, or white horses around it, but never took it off.
There's a lane of traffic blocked?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Are there any other additional citizen comments?
I have a question. It looks like that we're gonna make some progress with this gentleman from Maxwell Street. Do you have a timeline when these people from Sterrett Street will get some answers about what's going on up there?
So at the end of the month, we're gonna have a workshop with the engineer to talk about the capital improvement plan, because the problem that they're addressing, there's two issues that can be addressed. One is through a larger capital, it's gonna require capital planning and a physical improvement to our system, all right, to make it more resilient. But the second thing is the curbing that they put in, that the engineer put in with the road crew. We can look at doing curb cut or see if we can roll it out flatter. We have to address that issue with the Director of Public Works and the engineer to figure out what a solution would be, because from what I understand, essentially they need these high curbs, and per the engineer said that their job is to control the water. Well, they control the water by making the curves and force the water into the system. The water used to go over into the grass and then to the woodland area. So we have to figure out, well, what do we want them to do? Because they thought, as the engineer, that would be the best practice to control the water.
But they're putting the water in a 8-inch pipe still.
Correct.
That's already backing up.
Right, so.
And the water would otherwise run into the woods, into the city.
Just go over the hill behind Parade
Right,
Street.
which could, through logic, in their mind, if that was your property down below, you had a piece of property there or a basement, which, from my understanding, from looking from our portal, our let's say Google Map view, it looks like it's a pretty wooded area without any basements. But again, that was just a layman looking at it very quickly. So we need to address this issue. I was out there last night speaking with the residents out on the street, trying to get an understanding of what was going on, if there's any backups. So I was out in the community last night. It was around 10 o'clock, and the resident was outside, and I took a moment to speak with him, and he said the issue was the fact that the storm drains.
So you think they'll hear something back after this meeting you have with the engineers?
Yeah, we all are going to be meeting with the engineer to talk about the big picture. We're going to have the consent.
Or what?
Yes. Yeah, we're going to be having a meeting, and we have to decide on what the budget is going to look like for these improvements. This is a system-wide improvement. We're in talks with Alcosan. The engineer would like to proceed with a design to separate the Clearview project, Clearview extension, the entire thing. So, and we're going to be working with PennDOT. We did have a preliminary meeting when we were talking about the rain garden, about the situation, and they're very interested in doing a separation, which will create more capacity in the system for that entire 40 to 60 acre area if we completely separate both ends of Clearview. And then we need to look at the entire town section by section and figure out where we can get the biggest bang for a buck and how we're going to tie this into the transient-oriented development plan. Because as I've been speaking for the past couple of years here, we have an opportunity to make a generational investment in the community, and we need to talk about rain, our stormwater management, and our walkable community that we want to have and we want to develop. Because as you see, when we pave roads, not only do we have traffic issues, but we have stormwater management issues. And so we have to figure out how we're going to do things that don't exacerbate the stormwater management issues.
Sorry. May I ask the question?
Yeah, the next, and the solicitor was instructing me to clarify, the next business meeting, we're inviting the engineer, and we're going to have a section where we're just gonna talk about the plan. We're gonna have them bring up on the screen our community and talk about the different pain points that are called out in the 2013 report, talk about the consent order, educate everybody in this room about the consent order, what it means, why do we sit here and approve these SHACOG motions? You know, so go ahead.
Yeah, do you mind?
No, go ahead.
Okay, just so I gave the engineer a call today because these are some questions that came up when we were looking at approving the administrative end of the SHACOG agreements. So when we talk about, you know, what are the spots in the borough that really need some work in terms of sewer lines or storm sewer lines, I guess combined, that you know, they have tree roots growing through them, or they've collapsed partially, and so they're not taking as much flow and they're not large enough. One of those joint bids that we have participated in is the CCTV joint bid. So he explained to me that essentially with the consent order with Alcosan and you know, with the county, they require every 10 years, you know, the portion of the sewers to be looked at essentially. So you sort of break up all of your lines into 10 pieces, and then you put those on a cycle. And then the ones that are the really major conveyance lines, you do the same thing but with 5 years. So in terms of identifying, like what you said the major pain points are, that is part of that process. And then some of those joint bids are also to respond to those things that you identify and, you know, hopefully get the most effective rate. Now, those things are on a schedule with the consent order that we're required to stick to. But if there's something we identify that's really, you know, severely a problem, there's certainly nothing that prevents us from including that in our own, you know, sort of capital improvements plan that we take on in addition to those joint bids. So.
My question for you is, you know, follow up from Mr. Amendola. At a prior meeting, the gentleman from Starrett Street indicated that we had a discussion about, I think, backflow preventers. I'm wondering if Councilman Amendola's line of questioning was in regards to something of that nature, or are we talking about, are you asking about?
They keep coming in and asking for answers, and they're not getting them. And
Right.
so I'm trying to find out when they're gonna get some answers. And I think what he said was that in 2 weeks, the engineers will be here, and everyone will have the opportunity to ask the questions and find out what their plan is for Starrett Street. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a.
Okay, so in 2 weeks, it's gonna be a public meeting that anyone can
Yeah.
come to.
A regular meeting.
And
Yes, it's our regular meeting.
Regular meeting, it's
Yep.
2 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Just for
because, go ahead.
No, and just for clarification, the giant binder at my house that's dense, and I'm not an engineer, that is the capital improvement plan that you speak of, correct?
No, that's the overall system study that was done in 2013.
Okay.
So as we progressed, all right, with our road plan and we paved things, variables have changed. We need to take a strategic view of a few things. 2019, all right, we have a couple expenses that we know we're going to take on. We were awarded the Green Light Go. The mayor and I are adamant about making sure we do the upgrades. So at least $200,000 of the $500,000 road program for 2019 is going to be committed to the improvement of our signals, all right? That means fiscal year 2019, we'll have about $300,000, all right, in the road program, all right? We also have about $500,000 of cash flow moving through the sewer plant, all right? Then, in May of 2019, we have about $267,000 of capital that will be freed up from the Duncan loan payoff. That was a 5-year note at 2%, and that will be paid off. So when we look at our capital improvement plan, we need to think about what can we do in cash flow versus what can we do on a debt service. So with that, we need to figure out what we want to achieve and how we're gonna make the improvements that the community wants.
Right, so in the case
And-
of Starrett Street, just using them as a zero, point of reference.
Mhm.
So we have we have what, 800,000 basically to work with, correct? Is what I'm hearing.
That's if you're gonna do it on a cash
Right,
basis.
Yeah, so before you start talking about any kind of capital, do we have any numbers or any kind of data that we could point to as to what it would be to do a project like that in cash flow, vis-a-vis do multiple projects in a capital type improvement plan, or whatever it is that you?
We have not engaged in any kind of conversation over the past 36 months on that, all right?
So we'd be starting almost completely from scratch with a plan where we would say, like Starrett needs fixed, Maxwell needs fixed, insert street name here.
Correct, and we need to understand the interactions between the different projects. Because we need to manage the outcomes, the positive outcomes that we're looking for, but we don't want there to be, as we call in the business, externalities, where we pave an alley and we create a stormwater overflow issue, all right? So again, it's gonna take a lot of planning and a lot of esoteric conversation to discuss how we're going to address a lot of the pain points in the community. And so hopefully, with working with the manager and working with all of you, some of the things that I take for granted as your council president and with my background in water management, we'll be able to put it in layman's terms and we'll be able to work together to come to a consensus on what this vision looks like for the community.
Part of my questioning, and what I'm wondering is, when we talk to the engineer in 2 weeks, it's very possible that the engineer is going to say, you can fix Starrett Street in 2019 and then it's going to cost you X amount of money, and then we can look at our budget and say, well, gee, that sucks up all of the money that year.
Yep.
And then we have one street fixed, but now we've moved the problem to, McMunn or down the line. Or he's gonna come back and say basically what we started talking about right now, which is we could do these large term improvements, but this is what it would take, and these are how many years it might take to do it.
Right. Okay?
So there might be answers that we don't get, final answers in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
I would concur with that. I mean, we have our budget planning, it's coming up over the next 8 weeks, so the timing is perfect to be looking at these issues and then modeling a number of options as we go through our budget planning for the next 8 to 12 weeks.
All right, thank you. So, to everybody in the audience, and this is the time to plan, we're looking at the budget and all the input that we received over this in the past 8-9 months is really directing us that we have a lot of issues and there's a lot of urgency that we take on the big picture. So again, you coming in and providing your feedback will guide your council to make these financial decisions for the community. With that, do I hear any other community members have a question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm George Carey, I'm Brian's next door neighbor. I listened to all you talk about improvements, but it's just unfortunate, like, what you're gonna do is wait till the tree come down on the house, kill somebody, then you'll jump in and start wanting to do something. So, you just have to get this on the ball and get this done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Hearing no additional comments from the community, citizens, taxpayers, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.